the stage is set in Nebraska. It's a mechanic versus a billionaire. I love my odds. I've done it before. I'll take them on all day long.
So a guy who's a mechanic who led a strike against Kellogg's is the fake guy, and the billionaire boy who grew up in a billionaire bubble is the real guy who has almost no donors other than corporate donors. That's the real guy. Come on. Okay, these guys are a joke. All right, back on the revolution. Cenk Uygur here. So we're gonna have Dan Osborn on in a minute. He's an independent running in Nebraska. That is a tough project, but one I'm really glad he's engaging in. But before we do that, there is one comment left over from the last show that I want to read because it could actually be helpful to you guys too. Doom Mirage, Hafiz Protector said, please advise on how I can send unbiased article link on shorts from YouTube, proving that IDF are never to be trusted as they fill themselves looting Palestine banks and West Bank. Also, does Trump know who will be the next Iran regime leader if he takes out the current one? Yes, they're planning to put the Shah in as part of their regime change nonsense. Shah is a Farsi word for king, which is another word for dictator. But mainly I wanted to answer his question. If you want to send us some information, pitches@tyt.com. pitches@tyt.com. Thank you, we appreciate it. We learn and grow together, guys, and we do this show together. So this show in particular, Revolution on TYT Network, is about bringing the entire country together and crowdsourcing a revolution, left, right, and middle. And our next guest is perfect for that. Dan Osborn is running as an independent for the Nebraska Senate seat. Dan, welcome, brother.
Thank you, Cenk. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you. So, how do you run as an independent? Because the Democrats are going to say you're not good enough because you're not a Democrat. Republicans are going to say the same. So, how do you thread that needle?
Yeah, well, I first of all, I think the two-party system seems to cater. I love football, so I love football references. Yeah, they seem to be operating in their end zones when I think most people really are within the 40-yard lines. But to run as an independent, I think every state's a little bit different. But here in Nebraska, I don't have to primary. I have to get 4,000 signatures spread out evenly between the congressional districts here, which there's 3 of them, to get on the ballot. So ultimately, that's the meat and potatoes of running as an independent outside the two-party structure.
Yeah, so running as an independent is usually difficult, not just for that reason, but also because of structural reasons, especially for the presidency. But for the Senate, it's a little bit more doable structurally. And so, there's something, in my opinion, that's nice about running as an independent. It forces you to care about both Democrats and Republicans, right? And to try to appeal to both. And wouldn't that be amazing if you served all of your citizens? But one of the ways that you show that is through how you message. So I want to actually read a couple of your tweets here and then talk about it. And then later we'll also have some fun. Apparently you ran into Charlton Heston. I want to talk about that and fun stuff like that too. But first, here's the first tweet. You wrote, there's nothing that pisses me off more than seeing an elderly person far beyond retirement age hunched over and working a cash register at a corporate chain store to pay their bills. This shouldn't be normal in this country. So I'm curious, can you get a sense when you do a post like that on X, is it more left-wingers or more right-wingers who say yes to that, or equal?
Man, it's equal. I mean, we all have grandmothers or had, depending on how old we are. I'm not fortunate enough to have my grandparents with me anymore, but I mean, you can imagine your aging mother or your grandmother hunched over a cash register at Dollar General because she can't make ends meet. That's not the world we should be living in one of the richest nations in the world. We should be protecting our workers. That's the basis of my campaign. Is I'm unapologetically pro-worker. I'm the billionaires, they're going to be fine, but no, yeah. So that does resonate with a lot of people on both sides.
Yeah, so I'm going to read another one here because it's going to lead to a much broader conversation about a fight against corporate power in Nebraska. You wrote, in 1970, cattle ranchers earned 70 cents of every consumer beef dollar. Today, they just get 30 cents. Where did the other 40 cents go? Straight into the pockets of JBS, Tyson, Cargill, and National Beef. The big four are robbing ranchers blind while consumers pay record prices. Both sides are getting screwed, except a monopolist in the middle. So Dan, there's two parts of that that's really interesting. So first of all, of course, that's just a fact. So there's no question about that. But number one is the phenomenon. Number two is the cover up, right? So in terms of the phenomenon, it's funny, I went for a ride with some ranchers, I forget, it was a year ago or 2 years ago, and they told me this same exact thing. They said, hey, the problem with the ranching these days is that we're just not getting any of the profits the big four are. So for those who are unfamiliar with it, tell us how that worked, and how do we get from 1970 to here in that particular industry?
Yeah, well, I think you'd have to go back to the turn of the century in the 1900s, when the Packers and Stockyards Act of 1921 was passed. So at the turn of the century, the Packers that started to form a monopoly, there was 5 of them, and they controlled the entire industry, from the transportation to even the newspapers that reported about them. And they really consolidated the industry. So the producers were getting screwed, the consumers were getting screwed. And so, the President Woodrow Wilson stepped in and said, you know what, enough of this. We're going to break up these monopolies. So they did with the Packers and Stockyards Act, and through a lot of other antitrust legislation, as well as Teddy Roosevelt was involved in that. And so they started to break up. Well, then they started to reconsolidate after, I suppose it was around 1980, they started to consolidate. So fast forward today, there's 4 of them, right? And 2 of them that you named are foreign-owned entities, which shouldn't be possible, especially when you're talking about our food source. So they've consolidated again. They control the inputs for producers, whether you're a row crop farmer or whether you're a rancher. They control the inputs that the farmers buy from, and they control the outputs that the producers sell to. So the people who are farmers, and 2% of them, 2% of our population feed the rest of us. That's a problem. We got to keep them profitable. And again, it's the monopolies making the money, while us, the consumers and the producers, are getting screwed over, quite frankly.
So Dan, the way that I see this is corporate rule is squeezing us all, right? It's like that trash compactor in the original Star Wars movie. The walls are closing in on us, and it makes sense. Corporations eventually, especially if they can buy off our politicians, will have enough power to squeeze us to the point where we are at a minimum viable state. We could barely survive because they're going to take every red cent they can. Their imperative is to maximize profit. And you gave a really interesting example there of Woodrow Wilson, the president of the United States, stepping in and protecting American citizens. But that doesn't happen anymore. Our politicians work for them, not for us. And of course, money in politics is rampant, and corporations have totally taken over. So what's so frustrating to me, and I'm curious as an independent how you feel about this, is it seems like neither the Democrats nor the Republicans ever talk about this, and neither does the media. That mainstream media actively covers up the largest phenomenon there is, because it isn't just about beef packing. Are you kidding me? This applies in every industry. They're squeezing the life out of all of us. So what do you think is the #1 problem causing this, both in politics and media?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it starts with campaign finance. Robin Williams, the late comedian, said it best, that our politicians should be wearing NASCAR jackets with patches of their sponsors, so we know how they're going to vote, right? And every industry, almost every industry in this country, has been consolidated all the way down to our youth sports, which is insane. Whether you're talking about ag or healthcare or even single family homes, it's getting out of control, and they're doing it wide out in the open right now. Like Tyson, for example, closing a meatpacking plant here in Nebraska and Lexington, 3,000 workers losing their job in a town of 11,000, and they just settled a lawsuit for price manipulation, market manipulation for $82 million. And they're doing it out in the open. They don't care because they're the ones who can afford to buy a senator. So that's where I think the root cause is. That's where we have to start. We have to clean up our elections, and we have to clean up the amount of money. It shouldn't cost $100 million to run for U.S. Senate per candidate, mind you, in Ohio, Texas, Florida, Montana, and $1 billion to run for president. It's out of control. We have to dial it back and clean up the money in our elections.
You know who's got $100 million in Montana to buy an election? No one. Corporations do. That's it. And so, they every once in a while the politicians just admit it. There was this speech by a congressman out of Alabama where he said, "Yeah, if you want to buy a committee chairmanship, you have to give $1 million." So who are you going to get the $1 million from? There's nobody in Iowa or Montana or Nebraska that's got $1 million. So you go and ask the corporation you're supposed to be regulating, and obviously what's unspoken, that's Mo Brooks, by the way, who said that. And of course, you have to make sure you don't regulate them. Make sure they shut down the plant and you don't say anything about it, and then you work for them and not your voters. So I'm sick of it. I love that you're fighting against it. So I want to talk about your opponents in a second too, but how about Kellogg? Back in the day, did you strike against Kellogg?
Yeah. Back in 2021, after COVID, during COVID, I suppose that's where I cut my teeth was in politics, was on the picket line. In 2020, during COVID, at the height of COVID, we were essential workers. We were working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, 16 hours on Sundays and Saturdays, just like keeping that plant open. At one point in time, 50% of our workforce was forced quarantined and/or sick, and we kept four plants in the United States running at 100% capacity. And they made record profits. They went from $19 billion to $21 billion profit. The CEO gave himself a $2 million raise. The board enriched themselves. The stockholders enriched themselves. Capitalism at its finest, right? But then our contract expired. We figured we'd get a sliver of the pie, but instead they said, you know what, we're taking your health insurance. We're gonna take your cost of living adjustment, our only form of wage increases, and then we're gonna implement a 2-tier wage system with no path for a lower tier employee to go the upper tier. So we negotiated it for 2 weeks. Every time any one of those 3 issues was brought up, they would stand up and walk out of the negotiating room. So they knew what they were doing. They wanted that strike. And we shut down 4 plants and we walked off the job to preserve our wages and benefits. What they didn't realize is the value that our tenures had brought to that company. Like, I was a mechanic there for 20 years. You just don't learn that overnight. My experience there was invaluable. Those machines have personalities. You can't just bring somebody in off the street and expect them just to hit the go button. These are skilled jobs, and they found out that you can't just bring in a workforce to break a union and do it overnight. So we were able to win a contract, and I was really proud of the work that we did, and I was really proud of my members for standing up for what they believed in, and not settling for a menial wage where we can barely scrape by in our lives.
This is why I get so frustrated with the media, because they talk in this absurd language as if corporations are people. Oh, they'll do the right thing, they'll do the patriotic thing, and they'll share their profits because it's the right thing to do. That's not a thing. They're a machine. They're an amoral machine, and they are set to maximize profit. Are they going to do that at the expense of their own workers? Of course they are. Of course they are. And so that's why you need unions that's against these giant multi-billion-dollar corporations. And then they say, oh, we only made 21 billion in profit. We don't have enough. What an absurd thing to say. Did they do anything crazy to you guys while you were striking?
Yeah, well, upper management, would consistently say, we hope you guys lose your houses, hope you lose your cars, hope you go bankrupt. And then, when we were out on the picket line, the first week of the strike was kind of the honeymoon phase, right? We worked so much during COVID to get any time off was almost a celebration in itself. We would, have beers and barbecue and play music but then the reality of our, not getting a paycheck and insurance set in. And some people got in trouble on the picket line for abusing alcohol and getting a little rowdy. So they filed a lawsuit saying that if we continue this behavior, that we can't picket anymore. We have to picket. I think it was like 100 yards away or something, which would essentially have. It would have been very damaging. So what the company did is they would send in, we called them goon squads, where they would come in and bring champagne bottles and bring in beer and liquor and try to get us, to drink it on camera so they can continue, the lawsuit to basically break the strike. And we didn't fall for it. We knew what was going on. Our members were very informed, but certainly a couple of things the company did during that strike. Like, again, you mentioned it. They have no soul. Their main purpose is profit, to turn a profit so stockholders can enrich themselves. That's the main job of a corporation. They are not people, and that is Citizens United, right? That's coming back full fold to campaign finance reform. They do it through Citizens United that states, Supreme Court ruling states corporations are people, money's free speech, and therefore they can donate an unlimited amount of money to an independent expenditure of a campaign. Dark money in politics, that's what we got to clean up. That's what I'm fighting for.
Yeah, well, this country's changed so much. It used to be run by people, now it's run by corporations. So, you mentioned that, trying to trick you with the alcohol and the dirty tricks. In the old days, there were real human beings. Like you talked about the Packers, and as you were talking about how they were, manipulating things, etc. The Bears fans in the crowd are like, "Yo, I knew there was a reason to hate the Packers." But now another football reference: the Steelers, when the NFL players went on strike, all the other owners were against it. But the Dan Rooney, who ran the Steelers, the owner, came out with beer to the picket line and would have beers with his players because he supported the strike. That's back when we had real human beings running companies here in America, and we're losing that out completely. So, all right, so I got to ask you the standard questions. Do you take corporate PAC money?
No, of course not. I don't want to be a part of the problem. I want to be a part of the solution. In fact, we've had over 30,000 individual donations to my campaign. So my campaign is powered by people, the way it should be, the way the framers of the Constitution, of the forefathers intended this government to be, a government by and for the people, as opposed to my opponent, Pete Ricketts, who's only got about 1,000 individual donors. All his money comes from, of course, the corporate PACs, because he comes from a billionaire family themselves who owns a professional baseball team, and I think he embodies everything that's wrong with politics. So the stage is set in Nebraska. It's a mechanic versus a billionaire. I love my odds. I've done it before. I'll take them on all day long.
Ricketts is a spoiled little child, isn't he? Didn't his daddy make all the money?
He did, yeah. His dad is Joe Ricketts, and no fault to Joe Ricketts, obviously. He started something amazing. TD Ameritrade. They sold to Charles Schwab, but yeah. So Pete hasn't had to work a day in his life. In fact, all of his photos, he goes out and does photo ops with farmers. He's got a pair of brand new leather gloves on, brand new cowboy boots, and a Carhartt he picked up probably at Boot Barn on his way to the photo shoot. And so he calls me fake, but I'm pretty sure Nebraskans are going to figure out who the real fake senator is. As Pete Ricketts.
So a guy who's a mechanic who led a strike against Kellogg's is the fake guy, and the billionaire boy who grew up in a billionaire bubble is the real guy, who has almost no donors other than corporate donors. That's the real guy. Come on, okay, these guys are a joke.
And he'll probably spend $50 million against me, calling me fake and calling me a radical liberal, whatever he's going to say, because that's all he's got. Because he's got no record of his own. He was a 2-term governor, and he's been in the Senate for a couple of years, but he's got nothing of his own to run off of. So he's just gonna badmouth me. But you know what? I can take it. I'm a big boy, but well, hopefully well, we're gonna run a strong campaign. We're gonna do 200 publicly advertised town halls. We're gonna get out there where people are at. We're gonna talk to them, learn their issues, and learn what they think a U.S. senator should be doing for them. And yeah, that's how we're gonna win this.
So, is there a Democrat in the race or no?
Currently, there is not a Democrat in the race, no.
Okay, got you. And how about AIPAC money? Do you take AIPAC money?
No, we don't. If I can't relate the money back to working people and organizations that want to uplift working people, I don't want your money. I'm not interested in that.
Yeah, I'm sure Ricketts agrees and doesn't take any corporate money or foreign government money. I'm sure of it.
Yeah.
While we're doing this, I'm gonna look up Ricketts on AIPAC Tracker. I'll get back to you on that in a second.
Okay.
Okay, but all right, let's turn to personal stuff for a second. So, okay, you got me curious. I saw it somewhere online. When did you run into Charlton Heston?
Oh, Charlton Heston, man, I was in high school. I was a senior in high school. My dad, he worked for the railroad, and so him and my mom, he got offered a job in Bellingham, Washington, and he couldn't pass up. And this was in the middle of my senior year, so he was like, "Hey, we're going to Bellingham." I'm like, "No, you're going to Bellingham, maybe, but I'm not." Right? I wasn't going to leave my girlfriend and my basketball team and my baseball team, so I stayed behind and I got an apartment. And I got a job working at as Alley's in a Marriott restaurant here in town in Omaha, and I was a busboy. And part of my job was to, give water to the customer and tell them their server's going to be with them, maybe give them a menu. And my dad, I watched a lot of Charlton Heston's growing up because my dad liked the movies, Planet of the Apes, Moses, etc. So he sits down, and I recognized him right away. And I said, "You're Charlton Heston." And he had a book in front of his face, and he looked up at me and he goes, "Yes." And he put his face back in the book. And I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "I'm going to push this a little bit further." I said, "Do you mind asking why you're in town?" And he said, "A seminar." And he put his face back in the book, and I go, "Oh, okay." He's kind of being an a-hole right now. So I had the pitcher of water in his glass, and I said, "Hey, Chuck, how do you want your water? Do you want it regular or do you want it parted down the middle?" Because in Moses he parted the Red Seas, and he looked up from his book and he goes, "Regular," and he put his face back in the book. I'm like, all right. So I gave him his water. I bust a table, and I'm putting the dishes away in the kitchen. And my boss comes and taps me on the shoulder, and he said, "Hey, Dan, that's some of the funniest stuff I've ever heard, but I got to fire you because Charlton Heston wants you fired." So I got fired because of Charlton Heston.
Wow. He took your job from your cold, unemployed hands.
Yeah, I didn't know he was involved in the NRA or anything. I mean, and shoot, I was a senior in high school. I didn't care about any of that stuff. But yeah,
Jesus.
Yeah. I figured it'd be honored that an 18-year-old kid knows who he is. But
yeah, apparently not. But by the way, I mean, I love that Ricketts, the billionaire boy Ricketts, calling you fake. You were like a bus boy and all these different experiences that you had. It doesn't get any more real than you. All right, so talk to me about how the race. I'm gonna come back to personal because I can't stop. But talk to me about how the race is going. So, like, does the media treat Ricketts like, oh yeah, he cares about the people of Nebraska, and maybe Dan does too, and they've got different ideas on caring about. Like, do they ever talk about? No, Ricketts has taken a tremendous amount of money from this lobby, that lobby, the other lobby. By the way, I looked it up, $308,000 from AIPAC Tracker. Why doesn't the billionaire pay his own bills? What is he selling out Nebraska to Israel for? But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, we've had the third poll come out in this race, all independent polls. We haven't ran one of our own yet, but each one of those polls has us essentially tied. A statistic tie after Ricketts has spent $2 million in the state against me, and so I'm happy about that. I think he's got his work cut out for him. These guys, they don't go out in public. They don't do town halls. They don't go talk to people because they're afraid of getting yelled at. I don't care, man. I'll go talk to anybody because I'm going to relate to you about your paycheck, because I call it paycheck populism. I get a paycheck every week as a steam fitter. I know how much comes in. I know how much goes out, and I know how hard it is right now, whether it's healthcare costs, expenses, or grocery costs. I know how hard it is, man, and I relate to people based off of that. And we have ideas on how to curb inflation, and that's what we talk to people about. But then education. There's so many other issues. I feel like I'm going off on a tangent. Maybe I'm not answering your question directly, but yeah. So the state of the race is going good. But we know the storm's coming because he's got an unlimited amount of money. And but again, we're going to win this on the ground. He can be on TV and the radio. That's fine. But we're going to be in your town. We're going to be in your shops on Main Street talking to people. And that's old school politics, I guess.
Yeah. So Dan, I'm curious about how Nebraska voters are reacting, right? Because of course Nebraska voted for Trump, right? It's a red state. It's not, and Ricketts is trying to hide behind that. Oh, yeah, I'm for Trump. Oh, you have to vote for me. Don't use your mind. Don't be independent. Just be a zombie, right? So that's going to be his go-to move. Now the question is, how's it working? And by that I mean pretty specifically, like when you talk to Trump voters, are they open to hearing what you have to say? And are they a little concerned about some of the things that Trump has done, or no, they're still in Trump's camp completely?
Yeah, so when I do a lot of door knocking, and we have an app where I can tell who's a registered voter and what party they voted. I predominantly go and I knock on conservatives and independents' doors. And if I'm driving around and I see a Trump flag flying on a house or a sign in the yard, I go knock on the door because I want to understand, right? I want to talk to people. And what I've learned is they're good people. Like a lot of them are just they're good people. They care deeply about their family and their children. And when I start to talk to them about individual policies, we can agree on so much. There's things that we're not going to see eye to eye, and I don't focus on that. But what I do is I focus on what we can agree on as we're having a conversation. And a lot of what we agree on, especially in the rural areas, is tariff policies are hurting rural America. The foreign policies are hurting rural America. Bean farmers don't have anybody to sell their product to, right? And again, the inauguration, there was all the tech billionaires. So I kind of saw the writing on the wall. Okay, I see who's important. Because if I was ever president, I would have bus drivers and nurses and teachers and carpenters in the front row of my inauguration. That's who I'd have, because that's who I want to represent.
Yeah.
And so, again, going back to individual policy, there's so much we can agree on, and most people just love their family, and most people just want to be left alone too.
Yeah, so I don't think we agree on everything. I think that's kind of obvious, but my theory is that we actually secretly agree on 70% of issues, but the only reason we don't realize that is because media drives us to hate each other, and they take the most extreme person on the right and the most extreme person on the left, and they go, that represents the other side, now go hate them, right? So what do you think? Obviously I'm pulling that number from my hat, but what do you think about 70%? Does that sound about right to you? Lower, higher?
I would say it's higher. I would say most of us, regardless of on your party affiliation, I would say it's closer to 90%. I think if you ask a Democrat what the Republicans believe, they would come up with the whatever media outlet they watch, and then vice versa with a Republican, they would say the same thing about a Democrat. But as you get into, I suppose, the weeds of policies and education and healthcare and stuff like that, man, we are so closely aligned as people, regardless of our party affiliation. And it's frustrating to try to break through all that noise too, right? Because I have a hard time with media trying to decipher what's real, what's not real, and as consumers of media, we have to be responsible. But I think ultimately the story is go talk to your neighbor. If you're watching this and they're flying a Trump flag, go talk to them. You don't have to argue. You don't have to show up defensive and arguing. Just talk to them. I think you'll find if you sit down and you crack a beer and you talk about stuff, you're going to agree on probably 90% of stuff. That's what I found.
Okay, well, my sense is that that's about right. I have it a little lower than you do. 90% is very optimistic and wonderful. I hope you're right. But 70, even if I'm right, 70% is a giant number. What are we doing fighting nonstop? Why don't we work on the things we agree on first? Which, by the way, I mean, who's in favor of higher prices? No one other than corporations, right? Who's in favor of lower wages? No one other than corporations. So these are the most important issues. And so I'm glad there's independents like you out there that are emphasizing that. But you did mention beer and beans at some point in those answers. And apparently someone on our team has secret intel on your favorite meal according to your wife. So I'm gonna ask you about that. What is your favorite meal?
Well, it's got to, hands down, it's got to be a chili dog, man. I fell in love with chili dogs going to baseball games, and chili dogs with cheese and onions, man, hands down, the best meal somebody could eat.
You know what I say to that? America.
That's right. Right.
All right, hope to one day go down to Nebraska and have a chili cheese dog with you.
Hey, come to the College World Series. It's a tradition in Omaha. It's a fun time.
All right, guys. Dan Osborn's running as an independent in Nebraska, and he's scaring both parties and the media. OsbornForSenate.com, real populist. OsbornForSenate.com. Dan, thanks for joining us, brother.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. All right, guys. We are trying to find you folks who are trying to serve the American people. And so come on, let's do this revolution together. Peaceful, nonviolent, political revolution. And today, on top of all of this, we launched OperationConsequences.com. Vote out the incumbents who are taking Israeli money, like Pete Ricketts, but he's one of 94% of Congress. And vote out people giving our money to foreign governments. Like Israel, when we need it in places like Nebraska and all across the country. So, like I said earlier on the Young Turks, big interview with Tucker Carlson coming up tomorrow. Check it out on his show, and then we'll talk about it here. So, big show coming up tomorrow on the Young Turks as well. And let's keep this peaceful, nonviolent democratic revolution going and try to take our government back. All right, much love. We'll see you soon.